guys, welcome to the conversation. I'm your host, Yvonne Orji, and we have four amazing people here, two couples, and we're going to talk to you about, well, communication in marriage. So communication is huge in life, but especially in marriage. And sometimes if it goes wrong, sometimes the marriage can go wrong. So just be open, just be candid. What are some, I guess, communication pitfalls that some maybe new couples, so you guys are 4.5 years in, you guys are 85,000 years in. What are some communication pitfalls maybe early on that you guys experience, or that most couples can experience?
Yeah, I think whenever people do a bad job of listening. Sometimes you're so focused on what you might want to say yourself that you don't listen or understand or try to hear what the other person is saying, and oftentimes that can lead to assumptions, and you just start missing each other in the conversation. So I think having poor listening skills is a pretty big pitfall.
Okay. Now, do you listen really well, Sam? Is that?
I think most times.
Yeah, she does.
Most times I try. Yeah.
The other times you just tune them out, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. It can get difficult when emotions are heated or when you're not interested, and that's where love comes in. There are times where you're not really interested in what the other person has to say when you guys are at odds or when there's a disagreement, and so focusing on really what the definition of love is important.
Yeah, when couples miss that can be a big problem.
All right. And what about you guys? What leads to some communication breakdowns early on in marriage?
Well, first of all, I have to agree. Listening is important. I totally agree with that. But I would say, I think tone of voice, the way you deliver the message is critical, especially given the personality of your spouse.
Okay.
If you're a passionate person, you may have to turn it down a little bit just to get your message across in the right way. But if you say it in the wrong way, oftentimes the message will not be conveyed correctly.
So if your wife says, "But dinner is made," like she just really means that dinner is made? No, that isn't.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, listening and tone of voice and just the way you convey the message, you really got to be specific when you do that. You have to think about what you're doing before you do it.
And what about you?
I would say timing. I think timing is pretty important when it comes to communication. I don't think that you necessarily, just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean you necessarily have to say it in the moment that you think it needs to be said.
Okay.
I think there are times where you really need to pick and choose when the appropriate time is to communicate certain things. I know with us, it's been, over the years we've learned that there are just certain places we just don't want to have certain conversations. So if we're in public, maybe we'll save it till we're at home.
Okay.
Or if there are times where, we're just around a lot of people and it's just not conducive to having that type of discussion, we would wait. Or if you know that person is just not ready to hear it, give them time to kind of settle down, then bring the conversation to them, rather than kind of just immediately start talking about it, because they might not receive it and it won't go well.
Got it. Now, what if you get mad at 9 a.m.? Something that Cass has done. Yeah. And he's not really ready to receive it till like 7:30 p.m. Now, what are you doing in that space of time while it's festering, while it's brewing? Because you want to squash it, you don't want to go around the whole day mad.
Right.
But you're talking about timing when he's ready to receive. Like, how does that work?
Well, a lot of times I will pray about it, which is something that I've learned years ago in our second year of marriage. I learned that it was really important to pray and seek the Lord before I even approached him about it. Okay. And then a lot of times, by the time 7:30 came around, I'd have nothing to say. I'm not even mad about it anymore. It becomes a non-issue. And sometimes the Lord would speak to me or convict me about something that I may have not thought about when I was originally upset and wanting to get at him. And so the time actually works for both of us. Right. Sometimes it's used to convict you, and sometimes it's used to actually speak to him about something that he needs to hear. So I really think timing is super, super important, and I think it's something that we use in our own marriage.
And you said 9 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Sometimes there are issues that you have to wait months to talk about,
right?
Or weeks to talk about. It's not just a day thing. You may have to. It may not be the right time for that person. Not the right season.
Mhm.
So you have to discern whether they're at a maturity point, at an emotional point, at a place when they're maybe busy at their job. There may be stuff going on with their family, and it's not the right time to say, honey, I wish you would pick your socks up off the floor, or the way you said that thing to me, even I didn't like that. But they may be talking that way because of what they're dealing with emotionally, because they just got over something, or work is stressful, or whatever. So it may not just be one day where you have to be patient and wait for them to have the right timing. Maybe weeks or months.
Sure, I agree with that. And for anybody who might be thinking, like, well, how do you do that? How do you wait weeks or months? I think that's a part of effective communication. When you are communicating with your spouse, you have to tell them. Sometimes you say, you know what, baby, not today. Give me another day. Let me kind of let me think about it. Let me pray about it. I think we could talk about this at the end of the week. Let's talk about it during the weekend. And so there's certain times you have to kind of postpone conversations for effective communication.
But you should come back to it. I don't think that you should never address it again, because then that's a failure in communication in and of itself. I think you need to address it if you say you will.
So now, how does that work with the scripture? Like, never let the sun go down in your anger. Is that when you put that button? Or?
Exactly.
Sure.
So that's the pause button that he was talking about. You're not letting it go down in anger because you're addressing it. You're saying we are going to talk about it, but you reach a place where you both agree. We're okay with saying we're going to address this in a deeper level at a later time.
Right.
And so you can move forward when both of you are in agreement about that.
And there are definitely nights where you can't go to sleep without addressing certain things. So some of that sundown, it has to happen.
It has to happen.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes.
Stuff you can postpone from time to time.
Okay. This is good stuff, y'all. I'm like, check. So put a pin in it. Put a pin in it. All right. So on a scale of, I guess, 1 to 10, like in marriage toughness, what are some of the more critical, I guess, topics that can really lead to breakdown in communication? Is it like finances? Is it kids? Is it like, what are some of those like hot button issues, or is it just like the trash? I mean, I don't know. For some people, it's just you breathe wrong. Okay, I can't stand the way you breathe. I don't know. Is that?
I think marriage is two sinful people rubbing up against each other.
Okay.
And I don't know that there's a scale. It's just whatever you're going through, whatever life is like, having to work through any issue can be a challenge. It can be a 10, it can be a 1. So I think just working out stuff and then the other big thing is when you're dating, you can go home. When you're married, you are home.
Exactly.
Right.
So having to work out any issue that you're not ready to work out in the moment can be a 10 type of an issue.
Got it.
Right. Things that you never would have thought previously could ever create conflict can. We've had it. Like the simple things.
Like what things? Just share.
Yeah.
Sharing is
Anything,
caring.
yeah.
Like the trash can, we had a big issue about that being overflowing one time.
Now, was it about like gender roles, or just you're not picking up your cues on when it's time to throw the trash out?
It's a combo. It's kind of a weird issue. Like the trash was full. She put something on the trash, and I was like, hey, instead of putting something on the trash, don't overfill the trash so that the top stays open and bugs come. And for her, she was like, well, you supposed to be taking out the trash, your job, which is true. And it came back to what we agreed on during when we were in our premarital counseling, roles and stuff, and so we had to kind of work through that.
Yeah. It was just a good opportunity to work on the communication, because I think that episode created like a chance for us to step away, when the conversation got much too intense. Also to listen to the other person, also to consider a different perspective. I think sometimes a breakdown can be simply from lack of humility and willing to be wrong.
I
Right?
agree.
So,
Totally agree.
and willing to adopt someone or the other person's perspective if it's not aligned with your own. So.
Now, in that willing to be wrong, and I think you touched about it on it too. When you talk about there's those moments where you go to God in prayer and He's like, I'm checking you right now. Like, what is that? What is that like? That moment where you're like, what is has there been a situation where you're like, I know he's wrong, and I can tell him he is wrong right now, Jesus.
Yeah.
So let's fix this. And God is like,
Yeah.
So I need to talk about you. What is that like in those moments? Because that's a kind of communication. Because it's like God's communicating to you.
Yeah.
When you want to communicate something to your husband.
Just like she said, you have to come from a place of humility. I remember second year marriage, it was a really rough time for us, just being in marriage. It was new to us. I was in school at the time, and there was a time where we were arguing about something, and I went to the Word because I was like, I need to get a scripture for him because he is so wrong for what he just said to me, and I'm about to get him, And I was like, I was searching the scripture, and the Lord convicted me about my motives for why I was searching the scripture, and I was so convicted. I felt so bad, and eventually I had to go to him, and it took me a while. Like, I was not running to him.
You had to apologize to him?
Right.
Oh,
I had
Lord,
to go to him. I had to go to
Mm-hmm.
him and say, the Lord showed me that I was wrong in this, and this is why. And it was not something that I was excited about doing, but I had to do it. And he was like, wow, the Lord is good. Like, look at how the Lord can speak to you about something that I wanted to speak to you about for so long. And he never said anything, and he just allowed the Lord to minister to me and be able to say it.
Can we just put a pause break right there? Marriage is for big boys and big girls, ladies and gentlemen. That's a big boy, big girl, like, coming to Jesus moment. If you like, nah, Jesus, he wrong. If you talk back to God and tell God he's wrong, you're not ready to be married, guys. You just want to have sex. It's cool. That's fine. But you're not ready to be in communion and covenant. That's a big boy, big girl moment. And I know you're really happy about that. Like, she apologized to me.
No, it's true. I mean, there's one thing she said. She mentioned, there were times I would have to go to him. The go to him part, don't overlook that. It's important that in a marriage, I feel, you go to your spouse first. In fact, one of the pieces of information that we received from somebody very early in our marriage was, keep it in your relationship first. Don't go to your mom. Don't go to your dad. Don't go to your sister. Don't go to your best friend. Go and deal with God and deal with your spouse first. When you take it outside of just that union initially, it could become a problem. You bring a third party into the communication, you start getting advice from here, there. I'm not saying to not seek counsel, but if you don't deal with your spouse first, at times it can get complicated.
And I think he's right. You got to be able to do stuff in house.
Yeah.
I think it also, like he said, it is good to have people who are outside of your head, because sometimes, when a man and women are different. So as a man, sometimes I deal with something with my wife, and I'm like, I don't understand this at all. This is crazy. Like, I don't get it. And so I can talk to another man who has experience, and they'll be like, dude, that's just how it is. And just knowing that is enough to kind of keep it, to make it better.
Okay. All right, well, I got a two-part question. So when you first got together, how hard was it to adjust to each other's communication styles? And maybe what are your communication styles?
Yes. So my communication style, I think, can be passive-aggressive.
Aggressive, you?
I think, like, when I am frustrated, my area of comfort is isolation and being quiet. And I must have time to think and analyze the situation, whereas Tim, he is very communicative, and he's very verbal, and he at times wants to rationalize out loud, and I think I'm more of the internal one, and so he also is very good at handling or tackling an issue in the moment, whereas I'm the one who will wait for maybe a day or two.
When we first met, I would ask a lot of questions, and she would not say anything. So that would be kind of an impasse, and we had to learn how to navigate. I had to learn how to be patient. She had to learn to make those periods of time of waiting shorter, and I think it took some time, and it was kind of difficult, but I think we were able to work through it.
Okay. What about you two?
Well, I come from a Haitian family.
Yeah, sac passe.
Not boule, honey, not boule. And so when we communicate in my family, we are very passionate. We are very boisterous. We're very loud.
Intense.
And let's just say good
thank you.
morning. Let's just say good morning. How are you? What is happening? Like, hey, I don't understand what just happened.
And so that's how I communicate. That's how my family, that's how I grew up. We're just very, very close and very, very loud. And Kaz's communication style is very quiet and more reserved. And in his family, his household, it was just very quiet. People talked to each other, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't like a lot of activity. And he wanted things to be kind of, why are you talking so? And it's like, what? I'm not saying anything. Why? You think I'm loud? I'm not loud. So it was always that between us, and so we just had to adjust to each other, so that the other person wouldn't feel disrespected. And I think that we've become more like the other over time. Like he's become more outgoing and more extroverted, and I'm now becoming a lot more quiet and a lot more toned down.
Now, was there ever a moment where like you were trying to, this is a hot button word, change the other person to match your communication style?
Yeah, I think it comes down more to like, even so I have a background in sales, and there's a thing in sales called mirror and matching. So you mimic what the person across you is doing. Sometimes you'll see like political candidates have accents in parts of the country they never had before. And in communication, sometimes it's effective to talk more in the style of the other person so they can hear what you're saying. And as both of you do that, it helps make the communication smoother. So I adjusted my style in certain ways, like being more patient than I normally would because it fit her. Okay. She's been more like proactive in communication or asking questions like I did because it helped me navigate through the conversation. So just in order to talk, it helps to adjust to the other person's style. Otherwise, that's that thing, like you said, of being able to have humility to know that there's a better way. Yeah. And so just doing that naturally is going to make you start to become more like the other person.
Sure. I think that's exactly right.
Preach up here. I'm trying to tell y'all nuggets. All right. So now, we're going to get all up in your business. What is something that you guys still struggle with when it comes to communication?
Oh, nothing.
Y'all just perfect. Y'all good. They want to go home happy. So we're just going to move on to the next question. I thought we was keeping it real, guys, but apparently not so much. Keeping it real has its limits.
I still struggle with trying to, just be quiet. Like, I don't always want to share when I'm frustrated because there's sometimes a fear of I may offend you or I may express myself in a way that's not loving or you may hurt me even more than what I'm currently feeling if I am vulnerable in sharing what it is that I'm actually feeling. And so, especially when things are intense, it's very tempting to go into self-preservation mode. And I think that's where you have to continuously push to molding to one another and then emphasizing this teamwork. Yeah. Like, I think that's one thing that's really helped us in periods of conflict or building my confidence in sharing is when he's emphasized we're on the same team. Like, we both want what's best for the two of us. We both want what's best for our marriage. So you go ahead and share. If you don't share it in the perfect way, it's okay. We'll work through it together. And I think that's been very reassuring.
Now, just to kind of further that along, because you guys have a couple more years on them, does that ever go away, that need to, like, that fear of being too vulnerable? Like, I mean, obviously you're married, so it's like, you have my back, but there's like,
Eventually it does.
Does it?
Eventually
Okay.
it does. I think for Kaz and I, we've known each other since we were 14 years old.
So you did get married when you were...
No. We've known each other since we were 14 years old. And I think that when we got married, we knew each other in a different role. So when we got married, it was kind of strange, because we've known each other for so long. And then to get married, it was like, there's a positive side to that in that, it helped us to be a lot more comfortable with each other, but we weren't necessarily open and transparent with one another outright. I think over time, it does, you do become more transparent with one another and you do get more vulnerable. And I think that it happens over time. I met couples who are like married 50 years and they're saying that they've more recently, like in the last 10 years, gotten to that level 1 place with their spouse, where there's nothing that they will keep from one another. And I think that it's over time. You have to trust that person, and it will build over time. So it's gotten easier and easier.
You have to do it. One of our things that I think one of the biggest turning points in our marriage, because I still struggle with what she said. It's not just being vulnerable, but it's also you don't want to hurt the other person. Okay. And we got to a place where we said, just say it. Whatever it is, just say it. I mean, we're on the same team. We ain't going anywhere. Lord willing. So just say it, and we'll deal with it.
Because that was actually going to be my next question. Is for those people who are like, just put it out there. Like, if I hurt your feelings, at least you know exactly what was on my mind. Like, is that would you recommend that for people? Because some people, that knife goes in and then they turn it and then they take it back out and they put it back in. But it's just in the sense of, but I said everything. That's how I felt. Now and then let's build back up. Do you recommend that?
I don't know that you necessarily want to say it in the way you're thinking it.
Right.
I think say it, right, and be honest and true to what it is that you're feeling, but not say it raw.
Yeah.
I think you need to filter that through the love, mercy, the whole Philippians 4:8 test of just being sure that you're doing it seasoned with salt and grace and all of that. So you need to be very, very careful.
Yeah, the idea is not to break down your spouse, but to build up your spouse constructively.
So do it in an edifying way.
Yeah. Yeah, and because some people just say, "Well, I just had to get off my mind. I just had to say it."
That's just who I am.
And that's not even the Bible. We're called to speak the truth in love.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are certain things that you just even shouldn't say.
Yeah.
That's what you have accountability for. That's what you have, church leadership for, to share certain things like that you can't, that might hurt the other person to hear, but they know you have someone that you're sharing it with, so that there's a sense of accountability and that you're maturing in that way. And then if that's a topic you do need to discuss, raise it in a way that's edifying and it's to help them, not to abuse them or to throw up your feelings on them, but in a manner that is trying to build up the relationship and build your teamwork stronger.
I like that. Throw up. I like that. Yeah. No, keep that down. Keep that down, guys. All right. Well, I have one more question for you guys before we leave. What would you say your short list of helpful hints would be for couples who are maybe experiencing a lapse in communication? What are some things that have worked for you guys that you can give to our viewers?
This may seem weird to some people, but I take notes, believe it or not.
While she's talking?
Yeah,
Well,
that's good.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes while we're
talking.
having a conversation, I'll say, "Baby, I'm about to take notes so I can address this issue
Okay.
at the end of the conversation." Because I don't want to get lost in translation on my thought process, so I may take out a pen and just jot certain words to help me remember what points I want to address at the end of the conversation.
Right.
But I let her get everything she needs to say
Right.
out of the way first. And then I'm like, "Okay, you good? All right, so here are my thoughts on the following issues." And then I kind of go down and I outline. And I didn't start doing that until years into our marriage, but I feel it allows me to address all of her concerns.
Right.
Because I
And
bring
give her a
that
chance
to-
to finish what she's saying.
Exactly.
Now, what would you say? Do you think that goes against when people say, "Oh, you're really only listening for your rebuttal"? Is that the same thing or no?
No, I actually think it's not, because he's not addressing me, he's letting me get it out.
Right.
Okay.
And he doesn't do it in a way where he's like, I'm attacking you. He actually will apologize for certain things. I mean, he really thinks through what he's saying, and I know the reason why he's doing it.
Yeah.
I know when it's for rebuttal, because it's a whole different tone, it's a whole different feeling.
Okay.
If he's just listening to me so he can, bite back at me.
Mhm.
But when he's doing that, he sets it in the beginning and he says, "Babe, I don't want to disrespect. I just want to make sure I get this down so I really understand what you're saying." When you start off like that way and he says it that way, I receive it with love and I receive it in the way that he intends it, and I don't take it as a rebuttal type attempt. So I think that it's worked. I've not taken notes because I'm really good at remembering everything that he says.
You're a lawyer, right?
She's a lawyer.
And you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
She's like, the defense rest. Okay. Checkmate.
So I don't usually take notes because I'm really good at remembering what he's saying. But I think that one of the things that I think is helpful for folks is just to remember to not assume. And to hope for the best and think the best and not assume the worst. Because there are times where we've gotten into discussion or arguments about, well, you were late, why didn't you come get me, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, babe, there was an accident in this and this and this, but I never would have but we got to a whole big argument for like 15-20 minutes before we got to the point where I was like, oh, it was an accident? Oh, I'm sorry, babe, you okay? It's like, wait, don't assume that you know why the person is behaving a certain way or responding in a certain way. Really get at the heart of it and the feeling behind why. Like sometimes I'll think he's upset at me, but it's really because he feels like I wasn't protected or I was unsafe. And so there was a fear there. And so you really have to get at the heart of the matter. Why is he responding to you in this way? And don't focus on the way he's acting, focus on why he might be acting that way.
And you can ask questions to clarify that.
Yes, always asking why. Did you know? Asking a lot of questions instead of assuming is really, really important. And that's been kind of a huge thing for us.
A pastor of mine once said, assumption is the lowest form of knowledge.
Yeah,
That's good.
it's true. That's a really good phrase. And it's so true. It's very true.
I think one of the things, because we counsel some married couples as well, and there is something that a pastor gave us It's called the 4 Rules of Communication.
Mhm.
We can put a link up to it, but there's like just different points to how you can work through a conversation in a way that's healthier. That's just one blanket thing. Scripture filled, a lot of tips. We'll put that up. Another thing I think is to be really centered on the gospel. I think the biggest opportunity for marriages to be better, in my opinion, is for men to be better leaders in their relationships. And the biggest opportunity for men to be better leaders in their relationships is by reducing the amount of pride they have in their lives. Sinful, ugly, nasty pride, of which I'm the worst offender in that area. And the way that's been helpful for me, and I think as a Christian is very helpful, is to be focused on the gospel. Yeah. Jesus Christ was innocent, and he died because of our sin. Yeah. And even without that, and he was right, he didn't do anything wrong, he still was able to go to the cross. Yeah. And that whole Philippians 2 idea of humility, that's a scripture that's big for us, that he didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. And for us, we got to think like, man, if Christ could do that, I can be wrong in this case. Yeah. Even if I know she has some fault, let me see how I could have been better in the situation. And as you humble yourself and as you become a better Christian, it'll sometimes convict your wife to do the same. It'll also, when she starts lining up things against you, there won't be any room for attack because the evidence won't be there. And so if men could do a better job of that, I think that's a big tip for me.